I'm going to share my thoughts on developer experience and product-led growth today. I do want to apologize in advance because yesterday I had a sore throat and a cough, and surprise, actually tested positive for COVID this morning. I didn't want to cancel. I feel like I'm feeling pretty good, but I still have the sore throat. So if anything, we're going to be hydrated together on this journey. I've got water, I've got tea. You can, drink your beverage along with me. But if my energy is lacking, I'm so sorry. I did not anticipate this. Just kind of a bummer. Anyway, getting into the talk content. Just like my abstract, I will use DX as developer experience and then PLG as product-led growth, depending on how it looks on the slide, which I know is very jarring if these are new terms to you, but I'm hoping with a conference like DevX Conf, we're kind of all in the same boat there. I'm also well aware there's like 3 different ways that people tend to abbreviate developer experience, and I'm sure I'm guilty of using all of them. Likely in the same day, in the same conversation. So yeah, I can't commit to an acronym, so I don't know why anyone else would be able to either. Moving right along here, I wanted to just briefly introduce myself because I know I'm new to this conference. There's people that maybe don't know who I am. So hi, I'm Amara, the head of developer experience at Camunda. It is our first developer experience team at Camunda. I've had a number of roles in developer experience or developer relations, including community management, developer advocacy, director of DevRel, but they've all been enablement leaning, which I think is really kind of going to speak to the core of the rest of the things that you'll hear as I talk through each of these different slides and what my team is doing and what we are focused on. Enablement has always kind of been a theme in my career. Just as a very quick side note, my career has actually come full circle, which I think is so incredibly cool. When I was starting as a developer 10 years ago in enterprise IT, I was actually working on BPM and process automation solutions. And if you know nothing about Camunda at this point, know that it is a company that's looking to enable folks to do process automation. And one of the components for working in that is working in BPMN. If you hear background noise, my cat has decided to join me, which is always exciting. Work from home is the best. So yeah, I like to say that I was raised in enterprise IT, and now I'm thriving in enabling product teams on the developer experience side. With that, kind of segues into the next couple of slides where I want to talk a little bit about my flavor of developer experience, because I could tell based on the manifesto for the conference as well as some of the other talks that there are a number of different ways that we can talk about developer experience and ways that teams are doing developer experience. So for me, I kind of use these 3 guiding questions, or what I refer to as my 3 most important areas for developer experience, or areas of focus. I wrote a blog on this on dev.to if you'd like to really dive into more of this information. But I wanted to just quickly cover these 3 questions that I think are great questions for any developer experience or developer experience minded program, to consider. So the first is, are developers getting what they need? Which is basically, can they use the product? The most fundamental question. And I think to keep in mind with this question, or potentially all of them, is it's not just developer experience that should be working to improve this, or working to measure what's going on there. The second one is, are developers getting what they need efficiently? So we've answered the first question, do they have what they need to be successful? And then from there, are developers getting what they need efficiently? Can they find it without extensive or exhaustive clicking and searching? I literally cannot believe my cat's decided of all days to come and play in my office to pick this one. Then the last question that we have there, could you optimize the efficiency? I feel like the answer to this is always going to be yes, particularly when we talk about living in this agile world and doing agile product development. You could probably always do better, but it's something that you should think about when you feel like you've solved the other two questions and saying, we gotten developers what they need, they know where to get it, or they're getting that information efficiently. Now what do we do? I think there's always room for improvement there, and I like to call it out. As you've heard me kind of talk through this slide, you've probably heard me say things about product teams and getting teams what they need. For me and for the developer experience team at Camunda, we are an external enablement team. So we are focusing on our external developer community and making sure that they have a rock solid developer experience. So we report to the CTO via developer relations, all within the products team. Products at Camunda includes engineering, technical support, DevRel, product management, product design. I might be forgetting other folks, but basically the technical product building arm of the company, if you will. Within developer relations, we have a 3-pillar program. So we're one part in DX of the 3-pillar program. We've got enablement, which is us in developer experience, followed by awareness, which is advocacy leaning, engagement, which is community leaning. My boss, Mary Thingvall, has a great blog on this, so I won't go into the detail of the overall DevRel program, but I wanted to set some context as I start to talk through the different programs that we have at Camunda and what developer experience is doing. And maybe there's going to be some overlap with what your teams are doing and similar programs, or maybe you're going to go, hey, why don't they have a this program or that program? And it may just fall under a different team with us. We use the concept of DRIs, or directly responsible individuals, at Camunda. So I'm the DRI of documentation, and our technical product documentation is primarily authored by our engineering teams, which I know every time I say that, people are like, what? You have engineers that write docs? Yes, our engineers are not only capable of writing docs, I think some would even say that they enjoy writing docs, which is just fantastic and delightful every time I remind myself or am reminded of that. We do have a technical writer, and she is our DRI for our style guide and reviews all of our documentation PRs. So I'm looking at things from kind of an overarching lens to make sure that architecturally our content is sound. We are driving towards a documentation strategy to meet some of the questions that I mentioned in the previous slide, or iterate on those questions. And she is responsible for making sure that things like our voice, our glossary terms are all consistent across our documentation. We're actually in the process of ramping up a developer experience engineer, which is very exciting because I get to offload some of that work that I've been doing. And we're looking for him to be the DRI of documentation infrastructure. And I'm hoping that he has a chance at a conference like this to talk about some of the work that he's doing and will do in the future. Lastly, we have our technical community builder, who's the DRI for the Camunda Community Hub and the Camunda Platform Community Forum. If you're sensing a bit of a community theme there, that's entirely correct. And I wanted to just take a moment to talk through how this role is different than our community management role, because you heard me mention that we have a community pillar within developer relations. So the community hub and the community forum are going to be the primary mechanisms for technical enablement. So getting help, troubleshooting, knowledge sharing, collaboration, things like that. If you're familiar with Orbit or orbit.love, these programs are going to attract users in orbits 3 and 4, the outside orbits. And then intentionally, we want to try to get them involved or engaged with orbits 1 and 2, which are going to be handled by our community managers. If that is clear as mud, as I have to imagine it is for some of you who have never heard of Orbit, or that's your first experience talking about how these orbits interact with each other, maybe one day I'll do a talk or a blog on that as well. Last thing before I move to my next slide here is I think it's super cool that we actually support products that are developer friendly. So to a certain extent, developer experience is already baked into the company culture, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what has me talking about developer experience and PLG today? I'll take you on a little bit of a journey, if you will. Um, so I was participating in a cross-functional project team that was focused on onboarding folks to our Camunda Platform 8 product. And our CEO leads this. One day he said something like this, have you read product-led onboarding? Um, and just by the title, I had an idea of where this was going. But then I can't remember exactly when it happened. It was either in this same meeting at a later date and time, or maybe in this exact same meeting that we had. He said something very similar, which is, have you read product-led growth? And I was like, okay, this is probably worth at least a quick Google at this point. Like, could I get the Cliff Notes or something here? Because it seems like this is his new area of interest, which means it's likely going to become our collective new area of interest, at least within this cross-functional team. So I found the books, gave them a read, and was kind of pleasantly surprised that it fit some of the things that I had either been trying to communicate or was already communicating, but maybe lacked some of the structure or terminology to do so. Which is part of the reason why I'm giving this talk, because I feel like many of you are also in this boat and don't know it. So what is product-led growth? I went and pulled some screenshots from a couple of different sources. My honest recommendation for this is for you to go out and do just a quick search on your favorite search engine and look up product-led growth. There's a number of different resources. There's a number of different companies that are now incorporating that into some of their onboarding or their blogs, because they feel very strongly that they support the product-led growth strategy with their own products. So I would say if you're interested in kind of a deep dive in what is product-led growth, there's tons of information out there. So don't think the 3 screenshots and a couple different URLs that I'll share are the only resources out there. There's a ton. But I'm hoping that you kind of had a chance to skim through these screenshots to see a little bit about what product-led growth is. You can see it's a business strategy. You can see that it's an end user focused growth model. You can see that there's some comments about how you can be an end user that just gets started without restriction. And there's some examples there like Slack, Zoom, Calendly, Dropbox. You've probably had some sort of experience with one of those tools where you were just like, wow, it was so easy. I got an account, I got up and running. It did what I thought it would do. It was super intuitive. This is great. This is wonderful. I told all of my friends about it and now they're using it too. Maybe you don't use them anymore. Maybe you've moved on. Totally understandable there. But this kind of is the gist of product-led growth. As I mentioned, I wanted to share a couple of links here. So the 2 book links, the one at the top and the one at the bottom, are the ones that our CEO mentioned specifically and the ones that I read through. I added in a couple of others just to, again, kind of hammer the point home that there's a number of different places to get information about what product-led growth is. And I would say that's the homework activity on your part if you're interested in that. Don't let me stop you or don't let me sway you too much, but some resources that I thought were interesting for new folks in this space. So I wanted to sum this up. So I quoted myself. And by quoted myself, I mean, when I was writing these slides, I put together a quote because I was like, the screenshots were cool, but what does it really mean to me? And it's really more than this. I think I kind of summed this up in such a way that it maybe boiled it down too much. But if I take the 14 minutes to read the product-led growth definition blog, I feel like I should be sponsored by the authors, and you don't really want to hear me read for 14 minutes out loud. But if you're like me, you're immediately wondering, how is this going to impact me? If the CEO adopts this business strategy, how is this going to change what my team and I are doing? So really, this is kind of how I think about it, and this is how I set this context in my head, so that when I approach my team, or when we're talking about the things that we want to work on, the priorities that we have for the coming quarters, it's really this: making people easily love your SaaS product so much that they emphatically tell everyone to use it, and then they do. So how does that translate into what we're doing? We're trying to craft a developer experience that is so seamless or so easy for our developer persona that they get what they need. They're able to focus on exactly the problem that they're trying to solve, and they're not fighting our product to make it do what they need it to do. So in reality, nothing was really going to change for us. And I mean this kind of in the most serious context. Some of our teams were going to have to change a lot across the company. But part of DevRel and the externally facing developer experience side of enablement, it's kind of rooted in things that have happened over the past number of years. So if you think back, and this is potentially dating myself, but if you're familiar with Developers Are the New Kingmakers, that was published in 2013, it's kind of this radical idea that we've shifted from having the C-suite level employees sign the check and determine, yes, we're moving forward with this enterprise software suite, and we're going to make it work no matter what. That shift to the development teams and the developers were the ones who were actually making those decisions and determining, were we going to move forward with your product or not? I say we because I was in that position, oddly enough, right around 2013, when I was working through an evaluation team of BPM products, to be quite honest. But for my team and my role now, we're developer focused. We have a developer friendly tool, and our end users are developers. Like I have to imagine many of you who are listening or watching this content are. So we're kind of already in the mindset that we need to be in. Is there some changes in focus or very distinct priorities that we need to set? Sure, absolutely. But we're already in the mindset that we needed to be in. We just needed to really work on the terminology, or at least for me, that's where I felt like I needed to focus on the most. So going back to a couple of the slides that I shared previously, the emphasis here really remains the same. We need to meet developers' needs quickly, and then we need to iterate on that. So I highlighted a couple of words here across the questions that I have. So the iteration point that I wanted to call out at this point, is also that I want to be able to include new and emerging patterns that we're seeing in the community spaces. So our community forum or our Camunda community hub, are we seeing things that we should turn around and help people internally understand why we're seeing this, add that context, help them understand when there's potentially going to be a shift in these questions? Or from the PLG standpoint, are we doing something, or are we seeing something where we need to kind of go through an evaluation or an investigation to understand why are we seeing the response that we're seeing there? And this could be something as simple as, why did a community member make a developer tool, and are we going to see other people who adopt that as well? Is it because they didn't understand the product or how to use it, or are they solving a problem that we didn't notice or didn't see existed? And that's where you kind of start to see some of the cross-functional aspects of this work, whether it's in the context of developer experience or PLG, communicating back that community feedback, which may not be as direct as, hey, I'm challenged with your product. It may be a little bit more subtle, like, hey, I built this project, and it's helping me do X, Y, and Z things, and then flagging that internal so people understand, hey, we had a community member build this, why, how, do we need to do something to make it easier for these folks? The other thing that I wanted to mention here is even if the product has a frictionless onboarding experience, we're still going to need a rock solid developer experience that supports the full product and development lifecycle. I don't know if you've been in a position where you've picked up a new tool that was highly applauded by maybe your coworkers or friends, and you're like, oh, they're telling you it's so easy, it's so easy. You get up and running, but then you move into the intermediate or advanced feature space, and you're stuck, or you're running into issues, or the way that the product was pitched throughout the onboarding process is not the way that you're going to end up using it. That's incredibly frustrating. And I wanted to mention it because I do think it falls under developer experience to make sure that that's not a problem after onboarding. So again, revisiting this slide that I had shared previously, I kind of want to use it as a guide to help you better understand how this doesn't really change a whole lot when we talk about PLG, but it fits really well into the goals and what the developer community is looking for. So I'm going to modify this slide a little bit, and instead of having the programs listed, I'll pop back, or sorry, instead of having the roles listed, I will show you kind of the programs that loosely fall under each of those roles. I wanted to share this because these are kind of the programs or aspects that my team is working on, and I call it out in some of the bullets to the side there too. But each of these is going to contribute to not only developer experience, that's kind of why they're on the team, but also feeds into product-led growth quite nicely. So one of the things that we saw very early on is everyone is keenly aware of how documentation enables users through onboarding and activation. So they're very, very interested as like a whole company in what's going on in docs. Super relevant example, by the way, based on some conversations that we've been having the past week or so. So if I'm like kind of nervously laughing, it's just because it's so relevant. We're in the position with these programs or these roles that we have to identify and internally promote the new and emerging patterns that we see in the community. And you heard me mention that earlier. We do not do this in a vacuum. We get help from the rest of the DevRel team, included in developer advocates. We get this from our consulting team, from the other technical people at the company. It is really kind of an all hands on deck way to look at what we're doing here. But I mentioned this specifically because there's going to be things that we do outside of onboarding that still support the product-led growth machine or strategy, if you will, that may not be as obvious as, here's a getting started guide and here's how we do it. Here's the steps, boom, we're done. There's some other things that are going on there as well. Take another sip of tea here. So I pulled this from our internal handbook. I guess I should say we have an internal handbook. Each of our different teams have similar type content that describes what they're doing, whether it's a goal, mission statement, something like that. But I wanted to share this because I had mentioned earlier, we run this 3-pillar program in developer relations. Developer experience is one of those pillars, focusing on content and excellent experiences, which is probably the first time you've heard me mention it here today. But what I really wanted to touch on was the next bit about lowering barriers for all developers in and around the Camunda ecosystem to efficiently get the information they need to be effective with Camunda. The last sentence around who is in that developer community or who should be empowered or enabled with our content is really key. And it's everyone. So I called out a couple of different groups here, like potential customers, lurking community members, high impact contributors. But when we talk about something like docs, for instance, it's truly is truly everyone. And as I was walking through these slides on Friday, I recalled a conversation that I had with our demand gen team in marketing, asking who's the main audience for docs. I would say that docs is potentially the most contentious program in DX because you can't just necessarily focus on your developer persona or personas if you have multiple, because it's really going to be a spectrum of individuals that come in and visit your docs. But this is where I say that you have to help the other teams that you're working with across the company determine what is signal and what is noise, to understand where you should modify the docs, where you want to spend and invest that time. And this kind of gets us into the flywheel aspect of PLG. So I found this really nice graphic that I think is very pretty because A, it's a GIF, and B, it's very colorful, but I watched it for too long earlier and it was a lot. So I'm going to try to move on from this slide pretty quickly. But you can see here, this is from the product-led growth flywheel, or one of the perspectives that you can look at. And again, there's a number of different tools and diagrams in this space. So if this one doesn't quite fit what you're looking for, there are other ones out there as well. But what I thought was interesting about this is it feels like it spoke so heavily to what we're doing in developer experience and DevRel, that it was like, well, okay, then PLG works very nicely with what we're already doing. We just adopt these terms, or we just use these as a communication mechanism internally to help people understand, our value and our power and what we can do to help other teams internally. And this led me to quoting my boss again on her blog with what we're doing at Camunda and the 3-pillar program that we're running, that in order for a technical individual to succeed with your product, they need to be confident that they have the ability to use your product, or at least confident that they can find the resources which will make them successful. Enough of that spinning wheel thing. So this is the less fancy graphic that I actually made in March of 2021, with the idea that we need to think about developers in terms of where they were at from learning about Camunda or onboarding to the product, all the way through building production-worthy solutions. Because again, developer experience is not just going to be focused on onboarding; it's focused on the entire product development lifecycle, if you will. So these are the kind of metrics that I like to talk about, and how I like to talk about them, like within the complete context of where people are going in this space. And again, this also helps me understand where to dedicate time in areas like our docs. So if we use the product-led onboarding terms, they're going to look more like this, where we've got sign up at the top, which I've already called out there. We go into the completion of the GSG, or the getting started guide, which is first strike, which again is a product-led onboarding term. And then we start to get into what I describe as kind of the evaluating or building down to the executing steps, which is really getting into the product adoption indicator. So again, I felt a need to change the terminology that I was using to make sure that I was communicating internally in the best way that I possibly could. But some of this just fit so nicely into what I was thinking about, where we go from people who sign up. Not everyone who signs up for our product is going to be a good fit for a variety of reasons. I think I mentioned that in the next slide, and we can talk about that more. But once they sign up and they are a good fit, we want to move them into first strike as fast as possible. They may get to first strike and determine this is not the solution that they're looking for right now. But if they have a really terrible experience to get there, they're never going to come back. So we want to make sure it's a great experience. They love it. They understand it. Maybe it's just not right for them right now. Then they come back. Then from there, if they are successful, they want to move forward. We want to make sure that they start building out those POCs, those proof of concepts, and move into building that production-worthy solution. And we can track some of that through things like API calls, or where people are visiting in the docs, or things like downloads of SDKs, API wrappers, clients, all of the developer tooling side of things. So this is kind of the redone slide. It's no longer a funnel because I decided I didn't like funnels, and I was playing around with our new branding theme that our graphics team provided us recently. So I put everything kind of on a timeline. For developer experience, we don't have a lot to contribute on the sign up space, but my assumption that I make when users sign up is they're in evaluation mode. They may even be a little bit skeptical about what we can provide to them. So I'm going to make sure that sign up is easy, right? So I'm going to link back to camunda.com where I can. I'm going to have like a sign up button in the docs, link to the sign up page where it makes sense. But that's kind of it. And then I'm also going to make some assumptions that people are signing up and they're the correct persona, or we help them understand quickly that they're not, and that they should pull in their technical team, or help them understand why not this tool. After sign up, then we're going to start focusing on enabling beginners. So for us, that's a getting started guide in the docs. There's also guides for component level details, and then pretty much routing to the next step in a curated experience. So we want to provide a menu of options and help coach users through the next step in their journey through understanding our product. We also want to monitor where people are going kind of in a more organic fashion. You can do this with tools like Google Analytics. Where do people go, or what do they navigate through? And again, the docs is maybe the best way that I can describe it right now. Is if we see them going from the getting started pages into other areas of the docs, where are they going? And do we want to nurture that, or do we want to kind of understand why they're headed in that direction? Again, first strike is going to be in line with the completion of our getting started guide. So the user's confident this is the route that they want to go to, or not. Again, success isn't going to be every person who onboards uses the product. And maybe that's why I'm not a product manager. But there's a number of reasons why this could be the case. It could be wrong persona, wrong time, wrong product fit. Then we start to get into kind of the trickier space, which is the intermediate and advanced users, or advanced use cases. For open source projects, you could suggest that your code is really the enablement tool for these users. But at that point, it's going to depend on your developer community. They may still need guides. They may need clear configuration examples, tools for efficiency like SDKs, clients, API wrappers. Don't just point people to your code and say, here you go, advanced people, figure it out, because that's not a great developer experience. Surprise. So to kind of wrap up what I've talked about today, I would say think about the slide that I just shared. How are you enabling your developer audience today? Are you even thinking about that? Is there a strategy behind it? Even if it's adopting parts of the company or product management strategy, what are you doing in this space? The second question here I get quite a lot, which is honestly what inspired this talk a bit. Whether you're doing PLG or not, you can always start by talking with your current engineering team and community. You don't have to have like a full investment, like a company-led backing in PLG to do something similar, or to think about it in a PLG context, or even to just provide a solid developer experience or developer experience mindset. But know that with any of these items, you are going in the right direction for these to work together quite well. On the internally facing side, I am not an expert, but I have to imagine that there's speakers at this conference that are. So my best guess is if you care about efficiency or internal developer delight, you should probably build a team that's going to work out some of those internal friction points. Going back to my enterprise IT days, I realized my enablement journey actually started earlier than I recognized it. We weren't called a developer experience or developer enablement team, but I was an enterprise application capability engineer. And I put that all in quotes because I have no idea. I've never run into another one at another company. So I don't know if that was just an Intel thing and what we were doing there. I don't have a true history of that team, but we were effectively DRIs for enabling internal technical folks to better understand the platforms that we were responsible for. So if that sounds similar to what you're doing today, I would say go ahead and brand it as a developer experience team, and you will kind of win some of that SEO in a sense of when your new joiners or people who are interested in understanding better about what your team is doing, they're able to go out and get those keywords and those searches to help you better describe what your team is working on there. With that, thank you so much. My voice did much better than I thought it was going to do, and I didn't cough, which is huge. But thank you so much. If you want to find me on the internet, I'm pretty much everywhere. But Twitter seems to be the best place to find me and connect with me if you have questions that come up and we aren't able to answer them today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amara. That was an amazing talk. I also just wanted to say thank you so much for joining, even though you're not well. I hadn't realized that, and that was sort of a surprise to me. And honestly, really, really appreciate it from everyone here at DevXConf. I also just thought the whole talk was incredible. Some great recommendations. I think PLG is something, it's like a word I keep hearing nowadays. And hearing your talk and your perspective has cleared it up a little bit for me. So I will have a few more questions, I think, later down the line as I try and process it all. But it was really great. Thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
So we actually have around 5 minutes, and I'm really conscious, I don't want you to talk anymore. You've been talking for 45 minutes.
Oh, you're fine. Go for it.
However, there is a question that's come through from Stephen Hicks. Sorry. That says the 3 most important areas for DevX follow each other sequentially. Are they getting efficiently? Can they be optimized? Do you find that they are usually addressed sequentially?
It's a great question. I do think they are addressed sequentially, particularly that first one. We can't optimize something that doesn't exist, right? So we need to get it out there. And that's part of something that we promote on the team. Steven's actually on my team. I did not ask him to ask that question. But one of the things that we try to do is get information out and then iterate from there. So if we have the information out there, we can kind of do experiments or even A/B tests to understand, is this the right way for us to convey this message or provide this information, and kind of go from there. But yes, I would say it's sequential. And then of course, if you start to talk about Agile, you could probably put it all in one big circle and come back around from the third question to the first one again.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, awesome. Thank you for answering that one. I also have, again, I don't want to strain your voice. I think this will be the last question unless anyone else has any burning questions right now. But just from me, so people who are listening, who have been listening to your talk today, they're like, oh, wow, PLG makes sense. What is one thing that people can start doing today to implement this mindset into their teams?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I would do maybe immediately, and I'm thinking of this in the context of, you are either on a developer experience team, maybe you're managing that team, or you're interested in creating a developer experience team. I would immediately look at your company goals and your company strategy to see if you are maybe already doing PLG, but you don't recognize it, or your CEO or some of the other C-suite level individuals don't recognize it yet. And the reason that I say that is because I think so much of this content resonated with me already that I was surprised that I hadn't heard about it before. It could be that it's kind of, the new hotness there. But yeah, I would say take a look at your company strategy and internal messaging that you have about how you're working as you're working towards whatever the company goal is, and see if it's hinting at PLG without actually saying it. Because I think there's a number of us, and again, this is why I put this talk together. I think there's a number of us that are like, I should have words to talk about what I'm doing, but I don't. And then this kind of like cleans that up quite nicely.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that's the same with like developer experience. Like, it's like a word that is used to describe what a lot of us do, but then no one could really explain it until developer experience or DevX or DX started like actually becoming a thing people were talking about. And it's like, oh, hang on, I do that too. I didn't even
Exactly.
realize that. Yeah, that's really good
Exactly.
advice. Yeah, amazing. Well, Amara, thank you so much again for joining us for DevX Conf. I will leave you to rest, and I hope you feel better soon. Thank you again for joining, and yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much.